Hello everyone, this is our boy Jack, and he's found himself in a rather desperate situation. He's naked, he's alone, and he's been left on a planet that's a little toxic. Which makes the goal of today's video very simple. Survive the initial pain, build a ship, and leave. Something that was going to be a little harder than the Rum Island he was trapped on, because this planet sucks. With bugs, raiders, mechs, hornets, whatever this is, the air, the water, and Randy all trying to kill us. The only way we're going to survive is by killing them. But let's not get ahead of ourselves, because right now we're naked and alone. Taking a closer look at our boy Jack. He's an optimist with great stats and, as previously stated, has found himself in a pretty bad situation. The air is toxic, the temperature fluctuates between freezing cold to Satan's literal asshole, and everybody hates us. Well, aside from the Empire and the orbital traders, but I'm sure it won't take us long to piss them off. With it being just 3 degrees outside, the first thing we needed to do was find Jack some clothes. So, I think we'll just take some off this guy, because I don't think he needs them anymore. Being outside was also slowly killing us, and the only thing currently protecting us was a thin piece of cloth we picked out of a swamp. After a full day of inhaling toxic fumes, I moved Jack to what we're going to call the safety corridor, aka the only part of the map that isn't going to kill us. This is where I saw something called a rimclaw. Actually, to be precise, this is when I heard something called a rimclaw. The fuck was that? The description states they're incredibly fast, powerful, intelligent predators, and all I had was a revolver. So, I'm not ashamed to admit, I locked the doors and spent the night cuddled up with a boom rat, my only friend in this hostile world, who I will name Bill. Unfortunately for Bill, he ended up being our first meal. As you have probably guessed, food is going to be a massive problem. Actually, it wouldn't be a massive problem if my dumbass realized you could harvest the many mushrooms scattered all over the map. Something that took me about 150 days to realize. In better news, the rimclaw from earlier had died, allowing us to hunt the local wildlife. Hunting, however, wasn't the most reliable source of food, as the animals had a chance of rotting instantly thanks to the toxic buildup. So I planted a very small patch of rice alongside some toxic potatoes. However, these were going to take a very long time to grow. So we needed to find another source. One we discovered after getting jump scared by bugs. Oh! This dormant hive will produce enough jelly to sustain us. So, waiting for the bugs to fall asleep, it was time to do something incredibly stupid, like sneaking in, grabbing the jelly, and... Oh fuck! Oh! I did not mean to do that. In a desperate attempt to survive, I smashed a hole in the wall only to find that the bugs had just left. Instead of defending their home, they walked into mine and went back to sleep. Alright then. After walking around and just waiting for them to leave, they just kinda didn't. And Jack was getting sleepy. So naturally I just snuck back in and went to bed. The following morning, they just left. It's just... it's leaving. Okay, it worked. It actually worked. See you, buddy. Yep, that was incredibly stupid, and I can't believe we got away with it. Later that day, a wild man attempted to pull the same maneuver, but he lacked the skill and elegance to do it at night. So, yeah, he died. This, however, is where I noticed something. Let me give you a second to see if you can pick it up. Yeah, that's right. There's another fucking bug. Turns out this hive wasn't as dormant as it proclaimed to be, but I couldn't destroy the hive because it was our only source of food. So, as long as they stay over there, don't piss out anything too scary, and don't mind my naked ass stealing their jelly, I will gladly live side by side with them. By now, some of you might be thinking that the crops weren't too far away from being harvested. Well, it's day 7, and the potatoes had grown by a whole 18%. With the heist getting harder as more bugs spawned, I had to start asking some difficult questions when a lady called Agatha fell from the sky. The conversation I initially had with myself was whether or not I could sustain another colonist, but that quickly changed to whether or not she was food. Unable to decide, I stole her clothes and left her to bleed out. But with the crops nowhere near done, the bugs eating all their jelly and Jack starving, we went back for the body. After butchering her, Jack was just about hanging on mentally. So, to help him get over the ordeal, I built an end table. Which apparently was enough. So naturally, when the next transport crash landed, I didn't have any issues bringing them back to the base, shooting them in the face, and then turning them into food. So with food sorted for now, let's accept our first quest. A paid heatwave, with the reward being a unique pistol called the Laughter of Prospack, with both traits increasing its accuracy. I won. Feeling confident that a week ago it was just 3 degrees, I didn't expect it to hit 53. Also, before you even say it, I knew he was still wearing that parka, I just chose not to take it off. Anyway, I got some aircon built so at least he wasn't going to die from heat stroke. But before I could have a moment of relief, a psychic drone arrived, pushing him into serious mental break territory. Then, to make a bad situation worse, some bunker bugs arrived, who thought it'd be fun to provoke the hive, which for some bizarre reason triggered them to attack my aircon. Why are they attacking me? This lined up perfectly with Jack suffering a mental break. And the only food on the map was the jelly, which now had a mad bunker bug between the two. But, by some divine intervention, Jack managed to walk into the hive unopposed, eat the jelly, and go back to bed. How I got away with this? I don't know. I think when the bunker bug went mad, Jack just happened to walk through this door at the perfect moment. This bought him enough time to steal the jelly and return home. Then to top it off, the bug just left, which I can only assume was out of pure embarrassment. Before we go any further, let's talk about today's sponsor, World of Warships. World of Warships is a free-to-play tactical naval combat game that blends team-based strategy with historical naval themes, allowing you to dominate the seas in hundreds of incredibly detailed warships across multiple different nations. And currently, they're celebrating the 250th anniversary of American independence, with a campaign that tells the story of the revolution over the course of 4 chapters. Journey through this historic event by battling through naval history, all while unlocking some of the most American rewards I've ever seen, including 2 destruction effects and a handful of others to express your true love for America. So jump in and celebrate history by playing World of Warships today. If you're a new or returning player, use my link in the description or use code USA250 for a handful of patriotic rewards, including 7 days premium, 2 premium ships, and the glorious Stars and Stripes camo. This event is running until July 15th, so check out World of Warships today on PC or dive into the action on console with World of Warships Legends. Thanks again to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. Now back to it. A couple of days later, I got a quest to look after a refugee, accepting my intention was to make her my next meal. But she was a kind lady who I decided to keep around. She can steal jelly and hopefully research solar panels for us before she starves. Also, it was around this time that the heatwave finally lifted, and I was given another quest. The Broken Empire wanted to dump 90 bags of toxic waste. Now, this is where my stupidity shines through my 3,000 hours in the game, because I accepted it thinking it's not like this map can get any worse, right? Ooh, that didn't sound good. At this point, I didn't really know what to do. I planned to grab the rest and freeze them, but it seemed like Randy had other ideas, as he hit me with both a waste pack infestation and a heat wave. By the time half the bags had rotted, my once safe space was gone, aside from this tiny section. With only 5 unpolluted tiles and no gas mask, things were not looking good for us until our savior arrived. A man called Ho, who had a gas mask. Running out into a ball-sticking 62 degrees Celsius, I got a few good shots off before he charged me. Seeing this as a good opportunity to keep shooting him in the face, it was then I realized he was an imp, and by that point, it was already too late. After being stabbed a couple of times, Jack made it to the polluted water, and the imp had fucked off and started smashing my wind turbine. By the time I got there, it was already too late. The good news though was we were able to knock him down, giving us an untainted gas mask. Stupidly, I had Jack patch himself up with the door open, and he got knocked down by heat stroke. And also got the plague. Thanks, Randy. By sheer luck, before he went down, I received a quest to take in a refugee. Of course, I accepted it and rescued Jack, moving him into the aircon room while the refugee gathered food from some cargo pods. He, however, couldn't cope, and suffered a catatonic breakdown. I didn't really know what to do with him at this point, so I took off his clothes and left him on the floor to get over it. Just as we ran out of power, out of mercy the heat wave lifted, bringing the temperatures back to a reasonable level, allowing Jack to rest and get over the plague. The following day, the deserter quest popped up, I know the Empire is our only friend, but I really needed all the help I could get. Plus, it also sorts dinner. Nevertheless, things continued to go well for us, as a manhunter pack spawned in the north and got wrecked by the Hornets, followed by another group of bunker bugs who attacked the hive. Since the bunker bugs have a literal tank on their back, they won, allowing me to deal with the last mega spider and destroy the hive. I know I could have kept them around as they were a good source of food, but I wasn't too worried because I'm pleased to announce our potatoes had finally grown. Now with a large stockpile of potatoes, some sheep that we instantly slaughtered, and some more cargo pods, it's safe to say food was no longer a problem. For now at least. In fact, our food stockpile was looking so good, I didn't even have to butcher these raiders. Oh, and you may be wondering where the refugee went? He died. Turns out I may have forgotten about him. Once I had finished researching hydroponics, I placed them down only to notice that I had built them on polluted tiles. Obviously, this wasn't going to work because I wanted to grow rice. However, it's then I realized I could actually start removing the pollution by building a pollution pump. Something my dumbass thought was locked behind microelectronics. These bad boys suck the pollution up and pack it into a nice plastic bag, ready for us to freeze it and make it someone else's problem. Naturally, I got to spamming them all over the base, where I discovered the downside of these things was that they're really noisy. While the base was being cleaned, I took this opportunity to open the Ancient Danger, which was empty. Judging by all the blood and vomit on the floor, it was clear that something had been alive, but they're clearly not now, allowing me to steal a Mega TV, 14 Luciferium, alongside a few other bits. With just 2 guys armed with pistols, it probably wouldn't be the best idea to unleash 6 potentially armed and potentially hostile individuals, so I left it for now. Anyway, since we only had 2 people, Randy continued sending us transport pods, and I continued to ignore them until one of them contained Jack's grandson. There's really no polite way to put this, but he was fucking awful. But leaving him to die would upset Jack, so I had to rescue him. I guess he wasn't the worst person in the world because he had a burning passion in social, and at least he could do dumb labor. So I could leave him to clean the base, while I sent Jack and Hero out to raid a nearby farming site. Killing the guards, I stole their tomatoes and cloves and left them to die. Something I don't think they appreciated, as the following day, they raided me alongside a group of pirates. Conveniently, the raider with the shotgun decided to mess with the Hornets, allowing me to shoot the rest of them in my definitely not kill box. Now I know it's easy to kill people whose best tactic is to run at you with a knife, so let's see how well they do against people with proper guns. Yeah, they didn't exactly fare much better, including this guy who was in full plasteel armor. We shot him in the head so many times, we ended up lobotomizing him. Shortly after, we were raided again by some Neanderthals. They fared a little better as they managed to tank a majority of our shots, and during the fight we managed to down Rarr, an interesting fellow with 0 combat skills and a burning passion in both intellectual and social. Now I know they don't make the best of researchers, but we were going to recruit him anyway and make him our researcher. The raids, however, didn't stop, and this time we were raided by the Supreme Muggers, consisting of 4 well-armed pirates who actually attacked as one, but even then they still couldn't get through our wall of pistols. This would be a good moment to mention that at this point, I had imposed an arbitrary rule upon myself to only use pistols for the rest of the game. Anyway, with the raids out the way, I took advantage of the fact we had nothing else to do by taking in some refugees and cracking on with researching microelectronics, so we could build a comms console and communicate with the outside world. Something we really needed to do because we had exhausted our supply of components. Of course, the moment I built it, it broke down. While waiting for a trader, we got around to recruiting Rarr, accepting a quest to entertain a guest called Adam, and Hero started an affair with one of the refugees, who then left the following day. After what felt like an eternity, a combat trader finally arrived, allowing us to sell off a whole load of random crap I had looted from the Ancient Danger in exchange for some precious components. Obviously, this was just a one-off and meant we needed to produce something of value, so I planted some cash crops. Well, I had actually done that about 6 days ago, and they had grown a whole 12%. Growing just 2% today, I didn't think this could get any worse until some mechs landed nearby with a smoke machine. Brilliant. Dealing with the mechs was gonna have to wait, because I received a quest to deal with a couple of insect hives from the orbital traders, I didn't think this was going to be too difficult as they were providing us with some mercenaries, and as long as they don't spawn in the middle of my base, this shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, they spawned in the middle of my base. Unfortunately for them, I had a flamethrower. They, however, had a megapede that tanked all of our shots, mauled the poor mercenaries who, of course, I put on the front line, forcing us to pull back into the corridor. Baiting them through the door, I had Rarr tank while everyone else shot them. And in the end, this wasn't actually too difficult. However, we did suffer a pretty significant casualty. Our Mega TV. Obviously, the next few days were spent rebuilding, but I did accept a quest to look after an Alpha Beaver for those 2 precious advanced components. I also sent Jack out to shoot the smoke machine, traded some steel for some basic components, and watched the raid get mauled by hornets. Since the raiders were imps, one of them had set the hive on fire and destroyed it, triggering a whole load of them to spawn alongside a queen. Now effectively under siege by hornets, another problem we had was Adam getting malaria. Adam, by the way, was the guest I'd been looking after for a while now, and it looked like he wasn't going to make it. But the quest ended in 22 hours, so all we had to do was keep him alive until the shuttle arrived, and then it's their problem. Once it arrived, I threw him in the shuttle, and this did actually aggro the hornets, but this actually worked out in my favour when the queen stepped on a trap. With her down, I killed the rest of them, allowing us to crack on with advancing the colony, starting with researching xenogenetics, building a paste dispenser to stretch out our food, enslaved a guy who fell out of the sky, and fended off a raid of pigfolk. I'd also accepted a quest from our orbital friends to watch over a couple of prisoners, with the reward being a waster called Hangman, a 35-year-old who was useless at just about everything aside from stabbing people. Now I'll be honest, I didn't recruit her for her talents, but because she was a waster, and I wanted those genes. Specifically the tox immunity, pollution stimulus, and super immunity. Were we actually going to get them? Probably not, but it was worth a shot. However, we couldn't build the gene extractor because once again, we had no components. With no traders rocking up, I decided to go underground, something we could do thanks to the Deep and Deeper mod. After spending a few days digging the tunnel out, we finally made our way underground where I felt like I'd been lied to. I'd dug out a handful of tunnels and in return, the only thing I'd been given was the possibility of being crushed. And not in a good way. Also, possibly unrelated, but I'm still blaming the dev, I kept sneezing every time I went underground. So yeah, I'm not impressed, Mr. Dev. Please fix your mod. Anyway, at the exact moment we found some steel, as some kind of sick joke, Randy threw a steel meteorite at us. What a And just to double down on that remark, he then hit us with an infestation. This time, unfortunately, I didn't have any mercenaries to soak up their attacks, but I did have Rarr, who now had a whole 1 melee. After destroying the bugs, I shot some more raiders, researched fabrication, and had some viewers rock up asking me when the next Star Sector video is. Soon. Maybe. I'd also built a second cave, where we did actually find some more resources, including some components which made me very happy. These combined with a few I mined in a tile over, was enough for us to build the fabrication bench, allowing us to start producing our own. Continuing with good news, I also enslaved a lady called Sarika, a volatile cannibal with 19 mining. Also, she's a waster, which was handy as this meant we could give her genes the old. Anyway, now producing our own, I closed up the cave and let it collapse. Never to venture underground, ever again. With production now in full swing, we finally built the gene extractor and threw Secura into it for a chance at the big 3. Instead, we got aggressive, poor cooking, and awful animals. Not exactly what I was looking for, but I guess they'll help balance out our xenotype. With nothing much to do aside from shooting more raiders and buying components, this would be a good time to crack open the Ancient Danger, where I was expecting a group of heavily armed pirates. What we got instead was 3 naked survivors and 2 skeletons, 2 of which actually joined us. Bowman, a very neurotic fighter pilot with a burning passion in shooting and intellectual, and Dolphin, yeah, she kinda sucked. The last guy, he accidentally died of heat stroke. Yeah, my bad on that one. Moving on, with the majority of the base now pollution free, I was running out of space to store all the toxic waste we'd sucked out of the ground. So naturally, I put it into transport pods and fired it at a nearby hive, thinking nothing of it. Turns out they didn't like this, and sent a whole damn princess to try and kill me, who we dealt with appropriately. Actually, she was pretty difficult to kill, but after running her around in circles, we finally put her down. The only real injury we sustained was Hangman, who suffered a serious buildup of toxic, leading him to developing dementia, making him even more useless than he already is. Aside from that, things continued to go well for us. I expanded our food production, sold some more tea, and finally got around to deep drilling, which was going well until a mech cluster landed above us. Since it had a psychic suppressor, I didn't really want to let it live. So I set up inside the ruins and triggered the mechs by giving the suppressor a whack. Once triggered, the mechs made their way into the ruins, where we let the centipede walk through before ambushing the others. Things got a little sketchy when Jack took a gunshot wound to the head, and Hangman deciding this was the perfect opportunity to suffer a mental break and start insulting everyone. But hey, a couple of minutes later we finally killed them all, allowing us to clear up the cluster. I have to admit, our deep drilling operation was going well, thanks to having a bunch of intelligent people and Sarika. The only downside was we kept finding everything aside from plasteel, the only resource I really needed before I could start crafting bionics. I had actually researched the long-range scanner and found a chunk of it, but no one had been kind enough to crash and donate me a shuttle engine. What we got instead was a handful of mechs attacking us, where we suffered our first loss. Poor Hangman was doing a great job of tanking, until the turret next to him exploded. And even though I managed to get him to hospital and treat his wounds, he didn't make it. To be honest, he probably should have died in the explosion, as the cause of death was pollution stimulus, which I assume meant it was the only thing keeping him alive after he got blown up. Moving on, Exotic's good trader finally arrived, but unfortunately didn't have a shuttle engine for us. It did, however, have specialized limbs and the tox immunity gene. I'm not gonna lie, I had actually given up on harvesting genes and shut down the lab, selling all the genes in the process. Tox immunity though was the main one I wanted, because it meant all my colonists wouldn't have to wear gas masks and instead wear helmets. The only problem we had was that tox immunity would drive our hunger rate up to 175%, which wasn't exactly ideal when we had more bags of pollution than we did potatoes. Yeah, food might have been a little bit of an issue because it turns out when you replace all your rice fields with drugs, it may cause a famine. Once we solved that problem by murdering some bugs, I crafted our xenotype after sucking some more genes out of our wasters, ending up with tox immunity, poor artistic skills, and aggressive. Moving on, we finally got a quest that was going to give us a shuttle engine. All we had to do was kill a vampire and his thralls. Honestly, I didn't really care about the vampire, I just wanted the engine. So we shot her. A lot. With the engine, we were finally able to build our own, allowing us to start mining the plasteel lumps I had located. However, before I did that, it was time to give Sarika some enhancements, that being in the form of 2 drill arms, turning her into a mining machine. While she was recovering from the operation, Randy decided this would be a prime opportunity to do a little trolling by crashing a silver meteorite right next to my shuttle. I don't know if I'm the luckiest or unluckiest person alive right now, because if that meteorite had destroyed it, there was going to be violence. This was followed by a siege where the raiders forgot what a siege was and just assaulted my colony. Something that initially caught me off guard, but somehow I managed to turn it into an ambush, shooting enough of them until they finally decided they had enough. Once everyone had recovered from the raid, I could finally send our boys out to mine that damn plasteel, where upon arrival, Sarika got to work blitzing the lump with a 1000% mining speed, while Hero took a nap and Jack picked mushrooms. Yep, it was at this point I discovered you could pick the many mushrooms scattered all over the map. Half a day later, we mined 457 plasteel, so I dumped the toxic waste, loaded up the shuttle, and returned home, only for Randy to drop a plasteel meteorite. Oh, you motherfucker of a game. Honestly, this game can go fuck itself. When I returned, the first thing that arrived was an Exotic's good trader. Now with an abundance of plasteel, I sold some in exchange for some more components, because it was time to dip our toes into bionics, primarily giving our colonists stomach enhancements to reduce our food consumption. I also continued implanting genes into people and built the best prison cell known to man, because it was about time I recruited Sarika so she didn't run away. While we tortured her in a 70-degree room, I sent the boys out to deal with a group of ciphers around the defoiler ship. I went with the tactic of dose a Neanderthal up with go juice and give him uranium armor and watch him get stabbed from 9 different angles. Yeah, he didn't survive. After the battle, I started researching the techs required to build a ship, while also scanning for new resource deposits. So when I finally got round to recruiting her, I could send her out to consume entire lumps of plasteel with her now 1700% mining speed, while Randy continued sending us mech clusters. To be honest, I wasn't too bothered by it, as my plan was just to leave it alone and hope a raid walks into it. Randy, however, had other ideas. Fast forwarding a bit, I finally became allies with the orbital traders by giving them a ton of gold. Now allies with them, we can request traders whenever we want, allowing me to continue selling everything Sarika pulls out of the ground, but you guessed it, more components. Because building a ship is really expensive. Starting its construction seemed to trigger a whole bunch of hostile events, starting with a mech cluster in the south, a raid from some tox folk that broke through Jack's bedroom, and then a bunch of imps we easily put down in the box. This was followed by a quest I had been waiting for, and that's the one that gives us a Persona Core as a reward. All we had to do was defend against 2 groups of 30 snipers. Spending the next couple of days getting prepped, they finally arrived in the south and the east. The first group ran straight into my kill box and got annihilated, while the other, they decided to walk into the mech cluster with 4 centipedes. Yeah, that's bad. Things were about to get much worse for us though when a group of tox folk raided us straight after. Initially I was feeling confident as a majority of them had toxic weapons, something a large chunk of my colonists were now immune to. But that quickly faded away when I realised they had also brought flamethrowers, and I got to watch my front line melt. Poor Bradley was on the floor breathing in toxic gas, on fire, while the raiders continued hitting him with the flamethrower. Eventually the last turrets fended them off, but everyone in the colony was at least burnt. Some were still burning, and I'm not sure how I managed it, but not a single person died. But Hero lost a leg, and Bradley, yeah, he wasn't looking too good. But in better news, we got our core. Anyway, a few raids later, I finally built our ship and was ready to fire up the reactor. Before activating it though, I dealt with a mech cluster that landed with a mortar. Now we were ready. The first raid was a group of wasters in the north, armed with their usual tox launchers and flamethrowers. They didn't cause too many issues aside from a few burns, but after we fended them off, a group of imps arrived. They caused us some issues when they decided not to walk through my tunnel of death, but instead break into my base and set everything on fire. This was followed by some raiders who drop-podded on our base with shotguns and molotovs. However, let it be known that the pistol is stronger than the shotgun, but only just, as we did lose another colonist. Who they were was not important, but how they died was pretty funny. Burning, she crawled away thinking she had made it to safety, only for one of the raiders to detonate the mortar next to her. Yeah, that's tough. With 3 raids out the way, I was pleased that the next couple were relatively easy. Just some bugs, followed by some mechs that all walked into my fancy kill box. Actually, I don't want to be a buzzkill here, but all the raids that followed were a walk in the park. One by one, they either walked straight into our defenses, or we picked them off before they even arrived. The final raid, though, is where things got a little spicy. Overconfident, I wasn't really paying attention and didn't notice that one of the raiders had a doomsday rocket launcher. To repay the favor, I fired my own rocket at them, which, yeah, it didn't look so good after that. I did have some bad news though. Unfortunately, Bowman died. Something I haven't mentioned is her and Jack had a kid and got married just before I turned the reactor on. So this wasn't exactly the fairy tale ending I was going for, and she died literally 1 day before we were about to leave. As you've probably guessed, my original ending was that they were going to flee the planet and live happily ever after. Now I feel like the fitting ending would be to get revenge and kill everyone on the planet. But we'll leave that for another time. Anyway, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you to World of Warships for sponsoring this video. And thank you to the people who throw money at me. And as always, new videos more often. You see? I didn't lie.